Hello and welcome. I'm very happy to be here. There was a moment yesterday when I thought I wouldn't be. After I finished talking to you on this, like this, the rain began. So the beach was absolutely clear, no one around. I thought, okay, well, I'll go for a swim. Now, it is said that monks mustn't swim. Actually, in the Vinaya, it says that monks shouldn't play in water. So this is to discourage groups of monks, as happened in the Buddha's time when he formed this rule in the Vinaya. We're all splashing around, having fun, playing in the water. Of course, washing, cleaning, bathing too, but a bit of frivolity going on. So he made it a rule that one mustn't play in water. So I think it's acceptable for various health benefits, and when you're living on the beach, as I have done in the past, the only place to bathe is in the sea. So, and wash your clothes. Everything remains salty, but you get used to that. Anyway, I thought I'd go for a swim, and the rain was just beginning. I thought that's okay. And it was very nice and pleasant in the water, but before I knew it, the same happened to me as happened in India. This is the same ocean, a little further away down south, but that current got me, took me way out. I thought, oh no. So we swim in all of our robes, well, not this outer robe, but the little anxa underneath vest kind of thing, and this lower robe. And that all can billow about and make it a little bit awkward to swim anyway. But I got back to shore, but it's a very dangerous, strong current out there. One has to be very, very careful, especially when there's nobody around to even see if you were struggling, or even hear your screams should you be in such a position. But it was nice to go into the water. That's actually the second time. I think the current was changing because of the weather changing at that moment also, so it took me by surprise. That's not what I was going to talk about anyway. So let's look at your comments and we'll talk about those. A nice short one, first of all. Buddha has one son, and Jesus said, I am the Son of God. Is that some connection? Oh no, I don't think so. That's, I think, just referring to this Jesus Buddha video, short video that's there on this channel. No, there's no connection genetically, or the Buddha and Jesus are 500 years apart approximately. So, and many, many miles apart in terms of geographically. A whole lot of questions, so I'll quickly go through them. Could you, Bhante, one day show us how you shave your head? No, I'm not going to show you my ablutions. I don't think there's any... it's quite obvious, and I think I don't know why anyone would want to see that. How do you not cut yourself? Well, one is careful. You practice mindfulness in everyday all activities, and mindfulness, as I explained recently, is being careful. So you make sure you don't cut yourself. You shave your head as your face carefully. No problem. I do have maybe some cuts you can see on my face and on my neck, but that's the Balala the cat. It's not through shaving. As you see, I haven't shaved. So, but she kind of freaked out at me last night. I was just sort of playing a little game with her, and she went rah, like a tiger and scratched my face and my neck. Never mind, that was my fault too. Do you do it alone? So how do you not cut yourself? Do you do it alone? Yes, alone. I'm living alone, and I see no reason to involve anyone else in my ablutions. Can you use an electric razor? That's a good question. No. The reason being, an electric shaver. The reason being, well, I don't always have electricity for starters, and these things, extra devices, can go wrong, so you don't want to be carrying those. It's not part of our requisites, whereas a razor blade is. There is a Vinaya rule that we cannot use scissors, and electric razors, I suppose depending on how they work, but most of them involve a clippering action, which counts as scissors. We're not allowed to use clippers, I think, is the Vinaya terminology when translated, and electric razors count as clippers. So any grading or trimming, as one would do with clippers or scissors, is entirely unnecessary. We use a blade, a razor blade. But I didn't mean to be rude about that first couple of questions, because the rest of these questions are quite good, I suppose. They're Vinaya related, Vinaya Pitaka related. How did the monks shave before the invention of modern razor blades? Well, modern razor blades are not very modern. They're razor blades. I don't really use modern razor blades. We use just the old-fashioned double-sided razor blade, which we break in two and stick in a little stick. So it's like a cutthroat razor. We use this very carefully. And that would be much what the monks would have used in the time of the Buddha. I don't know exactly how they got sharp blades as sharp as that or as thin as that, probably by the same means that they do today. And then or do they use a piece of sharp glass or obsidian blade? Well, I don't think so. I think that goes back way before the Buddha's time, to Stone Age time, or I don't know. I don't even really sure that I know what obsidian blade is. Are razor blades and toothbrushes one of your requisites? Razor, yes. Toothbrush, no. 8 requisites are the 3 robes: the upper robe, lower robe, and outer robe. 1, 2, I'll do it like this. 1, 2, 3. Razor, water filter, belt, pinned apart, and something really obvious. So 1, 2, 3 robes, razor blade, belt, water filter, pinned apart, our arms bowl. Something else will come to me in a minute. I've said them in a different order to what I usually say them. So anyway, it doesn't include toothbrush, but like it doesn't include soap, it doesn't include toothpaste, it doesn't include water. These are because these are consumable things, and a toothbrush, like, I think I can continue talking, it's not so loud for you. A toothbrush, like toothpaste, in these parts is consumable. They usually use a type of stick which they bash the end off to make it into a brush and brush their teeth like that. It's called a tooth stick. And one thing monks can do for giving their teachers a gift is tooth sticks. They can make them by getting a piece of this stick, bashing it at the end to make a brush, and these are for cleaning your teeth. I mean, we use whatever toothbrushes are offered to us, the plastic, new, modern variety, and we use them and dispose of them. So they're kind of a consumable requisite, as opposed to part of our travelling requisites. And I can't for the life of me think of what the 8th requisite is there. Don't know why my mind's gone blank there. I'm going to count them up again. Outer robe, upper robe, lower robe, belt, water filter, razor, pinned apart, that's the arms bowl. It'll maybe come to me later on, or maybe not. And yes, that's it for requisites. So let's get on with the next question. That one can wait for when we have Okay, so there's a couple of people asking about ordination for themselves and about mine, and well, I have really explained that in some detail in the video that says why become a monk. There's 2 videos, how to become a monk and how to become a monk and why. The one that's and why is more about my ordination, I think, than ordinations in general. And you're asking about why I ordained in India, not in Thailand, and this and that and the other, and in which lineage and which tradition and this and all of this. Do you know that doesn't actually matter? Because you are ordained. Even I couldn't go to Thailand. The world was closed for about 3 years. pandemic or something like that, and the only place I could go to at the time was India, so I ordained in India in the Theravada tradition. Now that covers everything. So the Thai Forest tradition of Ajahn Chah, the monasteries where I first learned and practiced and have trained in for many years, I didn't ordain in, but even if I'd been in Thailand, the monastery where I am, I think they send you to one of the temples in the city, a city temple, for the ordination ceremony, practical side of ordination, and then you come back and carry on. It's not that is important. Of course, it's important in terms of becoming ordained bhikkhu, taking the Pasampada. You have Pabaja first, which you would do where you're staying, where you're living. This is the novice ordination. There you're on 10 precepts plus the 75 training rules. Then you take Upasampada after a few years or a year or so, which is higher ordination, which you can do anywhere in the lineage of the Theravada tradition. But it usually has to be a monk of, I think, of about, it's more than 10 vasas, 10 years in the robes themselves. I think it might even be 20. I heard somewhere though it was 12 was enough, but that could have just been for bhikkhunis, I'm not sure. But certainly they need to be very senior monks, and they're usually specialists in ordination, and that's what they do. And they are residing in a temple monastery, a city monastery, and you're taken off in a vehicle with all your people who want to come to the ceremony, and you're done, and then you're returned to back where you live. It's where you practice. It's how you practice which is important, because we are all, as monks, in following this same Vinaya Pitaka, whatever tradition. And then more emphasis is put on different aspects of it in the varying traditions and schools within the overall umbrella of Theravada. So there's no sort of mystical reasoning behind all of what you're asking me there. Apart from there was a COVID pandemic and I couldn't go to where I was supposed to go. Jesus is Buddhist monk, ? Oh, lots of these ones coming up today. No, he's not. He's dead. Or in heaven, some people would say. What he did in his missing years, the years that are not accounted for in the Bible, I have no idea. But it's rumoured, and this is what I mentioned, that there was every possibility and actually quite a strong likelihood that he would have more easily have travelled to the east, to sort of northern India, foothills of the Himalayas, and encountered Buddhist monks than to have gone anywhere else from where he was living. But he did disappear after his bar mitzvah for some, I can't remember whether it's 16 or 18 years, and was never mentioned again, nothing in writing again, until he was 30 years old. That is quite some time. 16, 30, that's 14 years, isn't it? So that's quite some time, as then would be an adult at the age of 14, you're born bar mitzvah, you're classified as an adult. So he was an adult for 14 years. Now, popular story is he just toiled away in his father's carpentry shed, making chairs and tables. Now, I somehow think of a person, an individual who had already exhibited great skill and expertise in understanding and teaching and philosophy in general, would not have been just satisfied with working in his father's workshop making chairs and tables for 14 years before suddenly, I become Jesus Christ, the Saviour of the world. No, I think that's unlikely. I think he went and spent this time more productively, learning, practicing, and a lot of what he teaches subsequently, from the age of 30 to 33, a lot of what he learnt can at that time be accredited to some Persian regions or northern Indian regions, Ayurvedic medicine, for instance, for healing purposes, and meditation for some of the skills that he physically developed and was able to exhibit. So this is just a theory, although there are certainly parts of northern India where they do have so-called documentary evidence and written records of the presence of Jesus at that time, of his in his era, in those years. But he wasn't actually a monk, as far as I know, and if he was, he probably wouldn't have found it necessary to have returned to teach what is largely contrary to Buddhism. He may have been a monk for a little while, but your question is he a monk, a Buddhist monk? There is the other story that after the crucifixion, that after he saw Peter, his last little exchange with Peter, his disciple, he travelled off east and then, yes, went to become a Buddhist monk. But of course, even if he did, he's long dead now. This was 2,000 years ago. So, okay. Somebody asking me about how. So they're not asking me, someone else is asking me, I haven't got to that question yet, but I'll cover them too. Someone is asking me, how do I not feel alone? How is it to feel alone? And somebody else is asking me how to deal with loneliness. Now, I think I might have talked about that at some length. If not, I will talk about this at some length as a full talk. But loneliness, you know, we're practicing, I'm a monk, I'm practicing solitude. I choose to be alone. And I find it preferable. But I wasn't always alone until I was in my 40s or 40 or something. I'd always lived with someone. From my parents, I moved out alone, but in with someone else, with other people, with another person, and then in relationships, living together, and then marriages. And I've always been with someone, and then suddenly I found myself alone. And yes, it is, I understand, it is very difficult to be alone when you're not used to it. From your entire memory, having always been with other people, lived with other people, to suddenly be completely alone. It's frightening, I do understand. It's very difficult. One of the hardest things probably to deal with, especially as it will come as a result of some form of trauma. Your ordinary company dying, being taken away from you, you taken away from them. It's not going to have come about by choice or anything that you would choose to celebrate. However, you can later celebrate this opportunity, and you can later make it your choice, because it doesn't take very long at all, I can assure you from my own experience, to become very used to your own company, become very used to being alone. And if ever you have the opportunity to become used to being alone, do it. Try it for yourself, experience it, even if you go to take up company later on, because once you've developed this natural quality of not needing or having dependence on others, you can live very much more comfortably, very much more practically, cheaply, and I can assure you happily, when you are able to live alone, practicing in solitude. You have the choice, the world is your oyster. Just take one little example. You're going on holiday, or you're going just travelling a short distance even into a city or something like that, and you go alone. It's fairly straightforward, isn't it? You get on the train, you get your tickets, you get on the train, you go there, you come back, you come home. Now, when you go with even your nearest and dearest, is it that simple? Not usually. They might want to stop here and have a coffee, whereas you want to go there. They may want to go and sit in this seat, and you might want to sit in that seat. There is continually, not necessarily argument, but you're having to think out of your own compassion of the other person's needs as they are yours. And you're having to compromise on the entire journey, there and back. Is that as satisfactory as when you simply just get on the train on your own and go and come back? No. You might say, well, it's nice to share things with others. Well, you might think that, but it's not true. You can experience everything more fully for yourself. And each and every person can do that, experience their life for themselves. We don't have to be continually putting posts on whatever, Facebook and things like this, sharing everything. Largely people aren't interested. What matters is your interest, what you're seeing, and being in the present moment to fully appreciate and experience it. Not worry about who you're sharing with it next, and is this the best shot here or that or the other. It really spoils the whole experience. This is a layperson's point of view. Now, as a monk, we shouldn't be doing any of those things anyway, and even in community, we have citta viveka, the word I mentioned yesterday. Not only kaya viveka, which is refuge or seclusion of one's physical self, so going and living alone in a cave, under a tree, or in a hut. We have, that's kaya viveka, kaya being body form in the Pali. We have citta viveka, which is more of our mind, seclusion, refuge of our mind. And this we can only create within ourselves, in whatever environment we're in. But when you live in a community of monks, other monks, or if you're a nun with other nuns, they're all practicing citta viveka, refuge of the mind, seclusion of the mind within. So there isn't this continual sampapalapa, nonsense speak, chit-chat here and going on, and that kind of communal atmosphere. You're very much alone, even though you're in the presence of other people, only conversing when necessary to do so for practical matters. So I hope that makes you feel better about being alone, but it won't instantly, but just keep with it, because it's really worth it in the end. I never want to live with anyone ever again. I don't really appreciate living in community much. I find it's unnecessary, because whenever there's more than one, the requisites, what is required, the accommodation, the support for that more than one is disproportionately greater than what is required for being one. So if I was to have one monk come to live with me, life would be considerably more complicated, not just than, for instance, that one monk living on their own and this me living on my own, which is very simple. Once you put two together, or 3, 4, or 10, or 20, or 100, or 1,000, then disproportionately the administration of those requisites, the supplies, the accommodation, everything gets considerably more complicated. Electricity supplies need to work, water supplies need to work, it all gets very, very complicated. Life is so very simple when one is alone. And there you can really enjoy this practice. You can just watch the breath, you can be with the moment. If you decide one day in the middle of the night you're just going to go and sit in the garden and stare at the moon, you can do that. Get on a plane and go to a hot country because you're feeling cold. You can do that if you have the resources. Or if not, you can just go to the park and sit alone and just watch the people going by, arguing with each other about where they're going to go next, knowing you don't have this problem. Everything's up to you, it's your choice. Any recommendations on a monastery that Westerners, brackets US, can join or at least visit? Well, yes, many, but I mean, it depends where you want to go. I mean, if you're in the US, you have some of the best in the world there, in California, and there are also in Canada, but in the US, yeah, I mean, there are some. This is something you can Google, as I did. You know, this is what you do. Of course, I did go on the recommendation for the monastery that I visited to Thai Forest Monastery in Thailand. But anyone searching for such things, if you want to go to Thailand, you can find them via Google. It depends where you want to go, so I can't really give you one for each country. You message me or email and I'll share with you links of contact details and this and or what you need to know. But if you're in the US, of course, it's a big country. I don't know where you are. There will be, in your own country, very good resources. Everyone thinks they've got to come to India or come to Thailand or come to Sri Lanka. Don't. I mean, this is the hardest place to begin. We have such wonderful resources in England, in America, in even other Europe, Portugal, we have a monastery. In Germany, there are now. Even I've heard in some of the Eastern European countries, if you're allowed to call them that these days, there are monasteries all over the West, which are very, very good monasteries that are talking of the Dharma in your own mother tongue. You must listen to the Dharma in your own language. not that of another that's translated, because it loses. It's very hard to translate these Pali words into English and into other languages. Some languages it translates more fluidly into, for instance, possibly Sinhalese, I don't know, but certainly Thai, because Thai is 70% made up of Pali anyway. But English, the language, the translation isn't so good. It's difficult. So then to further try and translate that in your own mind into your mother tongue, for it to really sink into the heart, is just another step that's unnecessary when you have monks in your own country whom have grown up in your culture and can explain the Dhamma to you fluently and directly. This is why the Buddha sent monks in the 4 directions, north, east, west and south, so that it would be propagated in all of the world as it was and still is remaining. It's a fallacy that there's no Buddhism in England and it's all in sort of the East. There are more pure Theravada Buddhist monasteries, as far as I'm concerned, in the UK, percentage-wise, certainly, considering the size of the UK in relation to India, than there are in India. There are many monasteries in India, but there are also many people, and it's a very big country, and only a very small percentage of those monasteries are pure Theravada Buddhist monasteries. Whereas in England, that's really all they have, apart from the Tibetan ones and some Mahayana organizations. Other than that, it's meditation centers. But there's access to so much in the West, so don't think you have to get on a plane or it's expensive. You can get the bus or the train or hitchhike to your nearest monastery, turn up, walk in, ask questions. But most importantly, just go and sit in their Dharma hall, their temple, wherever, and just meditate. Eventually someone will ask what you're doing and are you okay? Can we get you anything? And maybe, would you like to stay? Would you like to ordain? They may ask you this. I think that's going into another question I've got coming. They've all gone now. Where have they gone? Right, everything's disappeared. Okay, that's only my fault. Again, blaming myself a lot today. So that's that one, and that's that one. Oh, it's come back at the right place. That's useful. Okay, I have a question. Do you always need a spiritual master or guru for your spiritual awakening process? I don't have a chance for that. I've been on my own spiritual path for a few years now. Okay, in Buddhism, this is totally different in other religions. So Hinduism, for instance, the monk path in Hinduism is quite different. I'm talking about Buddhism only. So the answer is, do you need a spiritual master or guru? No, we don't have such things. We have teachers whom are monks of sort of many more vasas than yourself, or been in the robes for longer than you, whom have knowledge of both the practical and intellectual side of the Dharma. So are practicing, but also have knowledge, and they can teach you. Now they are available in book form, online, on these kind of YouTube channels, or you can go to monasteries and visit them. But you don't have to have just one. You can listen, watch, speak to as many as possible. You will find you'll gravitate to more, to some and not others, and that is good also. Don't resist. Don't think, oh, I shouldn't like this one and dislike that one. No, go to the teachers you like. It's because you have this synergy. You have this relationship, which they will also have with you. It's two-way. So listen to them. But if you have more than one, that's okay. You might listen to one monk about meditation and another about when you're wanting to pick up on your studies of the suttas, and another maybe if you're wanting to really research and understand about the Vinaya, living in a monastery, staying with monks, or becoming a monk or ordaining yourself. You may just like listening to different voices. In this context, that is also okay. You're listening to Dharma, and the way you can lubricate that listening to Dharma, the way you can help that sink in, is by listening to voices that appeal to you, listening to people that you like. So I'm not encouraging liking, disliking in a kind of anti-practice way. I'm just suggesting this is how we absorb Dharma effectively. If you restrict yourself, this is my teacher, I follow only him, that is the way. This is not the practice. This is not what the Buddha taught. Ultimately, our teacher is the Buddha. So you're not alone, and you say you have no chance of that. None of us have a chance of that. The Buddha is long gone, but his teachings remain in the Sutta Pitaka. The word of the Buddha is there. And if you need help with that, there are many monks who will very happily talk to you of Dharma, like I am now, sharing their own experience with you. And you can pick and choose, take or leave. You can listen to one monk for 3 or 4 years and then decide you're going to listen to another. Often we'll stick to what we know and what we're doing for that reason, because when you've listened to enough of that, enough of me, you'll move on to someone who's perhaps going in a direction that's more appropriate to your own practice. So we change, and that is okay also. It's fine. And you're fortunate. I'm happy you've been able to practice on your own with your spiritual path for a few years, but you're of course not alone, because you have access to the internet to have heard of other things going on. Someone's asking me about Mara, so-called Satan. No, it's not so-called Satan. Mara is really, it's just a mythological depiction of our defilements. That's all it is. Okay, so we give him, her a name. I always refer to Mara as a her, because I suppose, but I'm thinking of Mara's daughters, which are a sort of a physical depiction of temptation for the Buddha. He sent down his daughters just before enlightenment. I wouldn't worry about Mara too much. You know, this is your defilements you need to be worrying about, of greed, hatred and delusion. Sensual desire, bring it to the 5 hindrances. Sensual desire, ill will, laziness, restlessness and worry, which comes as a result of the first 3, and doubt, which is just not really getting to grips and understanding the 4 noble truths. So worry about that. Mara's very much a real thing that will prevent your ultimately attaining to arahantship at that stage of your practice. But unless you're pretty well close to that, it isn't going to be making any appearances and exhibiting any special powers, as you might say. It's really a way of describing our own enemy, the enemy within, which is our desire. That's all it is. Mara is another word for desire, put it that way. But if you want to visualize the dangerous nature of our own desire, we put it into this satanic-like form. Like you say in your question, if I'd read it, I wouldn't have needed to answer, would I? Or should we understand him differently, for example, as part of ourselves? Exactly, you're quite right. How to develop metta for beings like Mara. You don't need to develop metta for your defilements. You can have compassion for yourself, metta for yourself, mudita for yourself, equanimity for yourself. It's not a person. Or Angulimala. I'm not sure why you say that. Angulimala is an entirely different story. Angulimala was a monk, a disciple of the Buddha, whom had led up to the time of meeting the Buddha a very unsavory existence, murdering 999 people. His 1000th murder was to be the Buddha. He hung all their fingers, Anguili is Pali for fingers, in a mala around his neck. And he was missing the one finger. This was as part of a challenge he had received from somebody, and the Buddha stopped him in his tracks, literally, and changed his direction into a more wholesome way of living. He became a monk, he became ordained, and he became an arahant eventually, but not having paid back through karmic consequences all of the negative karma he had created. And I'm not going to go into the entire story, but this and Mara and Angulimala don't come into the same equation. If you're talking about how do we develop metta for generally horrible beings, nasty, cruel, selfish beings in general, with compassion. This is how we develop metta. We practice compassion. We don't say, oh, I love you, here's my kindness, loving kindness, nasty person. Doesn't work like that. You develop compassion for that person, and then you will feel loving kindness for that person. Because compassion is having the understanding that it's really not their fault, it's as a result of their circumstances and the conditions that have been put in place to make them what you are seeing. And they were born pure. Their mother loves them. Think of their mother, whom loves them unconditionally, always, whatever they do. And you will soon appreciate that they are too a being like yourself, but just without the knowledge you have, and therefore you have compassion for them. And how can one know for sure that they understand the teachings of the Buddha when our preconceived notions and perceptions are used to interpret such teachings? Well, try and let go of preconceived notions and perceptions. Well, perceptions of those preconceived, you can't preconceive a perception, but you can have a perception of your preconceived notions. Just let go of those. I mean, what do you want to read about Buddhism for? It's to learn something new, isn't it? Do you go to the cinema to watch a movie and sit there telling yourself another story? No. You go to watch the movie, become fully absorbed in it, and let the screen, the sound, tell you the story. This is the same with the Dharma. Listen, learn, understand, accept or reject. It's up to you. But let go of those preconceived notions and ideas. How do we know we fully understand the teachings of the Buddha? Really, when you fully understand the teachings of the Buddha, you will have attained to some level of enlightenment, because you will have no doubt. But it is really, the teachings of the Buddha must be understood as the practice, which is sila, keeping moral virtue, samadhi, meditation, and panya, developing wisdom, and the characteristics of existence: impermanence, anicca, unsatisfactoriness, dukkha, and anatta, this principle of not self. When you understand that, it will slowly filter into your life. It will change your experience of your life. It will change the way you behave and the way you are. And as a result, those causes and conditions that you have newly put in place through that understanding will change what you are and perceive yourself to be in terms of that personality. After all, anatta is not no self, it is not self. So it means you still have this image, this personality, but it's continually changing through your life, through the learning of the Dharma, for example, changing you into a better person. Therefore, this person is different to that person 20 years ago. But it isn't a self that you can cling to, attach to, because it is continuously changing by nature of those virtues of anicca, dukkha, anatta. So you look at your way of behaving, your way of experiencing things, how you would have reacted, let's say, a year ago, before you started looking at the teachings of the Buddha, and how you would react, behave, think today in the same situation. If there's no difference, then you're not understanding the teachings of the Buddha. If there's the slightest difference, then you are. And it takes a long time. So if you then have been practicing for 5 years and you look back, you'll see a huge difference. 10 years, even more so. But like looking in the mirror, you're not going to see yourself age overnight or even daily at all. It was unnoticeable. But you take a photograph look at a photograph that was taken 10 years ago, and you can see an incredibly marked change, an incredible difference in your appearance and your appearance. And this is the same with how we perceive and understand the teachings of the Buddha. Excuse me. So on that point, I should bring it to a close there, and hope there's something useful that you can use. If not, just let it go. And until next time, thank you for watching.